I gripped the rusted handle of the well's crank, my knuckles whitening as the bucket scraped against the stones below, hauling up the first whisper of the curse. The water sloshed dark and cold, flecked with silt from the Carolina clay, but it was the faint, unnatural chill that made my breath catch, like fingers brushing the back of my neck in the sweltering July heat of 1863. Elias Pemberton stood beside me, his wiry frame tense under the threadbare shirt, eyes fixed on the homestead's sagging porch where his wife, Clara, rocked their infant son in her arms. "You sure about this, Jed?" he muttered, voice low like he was afraid the ghosts might hear. Elias was the cautious one, always weighing the cost of every step on this worn-out farm. But tonight his caution cracked under the weight of what we'd found in the family Bible. Pages yellowed with secrets. Ink faded but damning. The well takes what it gave. Mothers first, then the babes. I nodded, though doubt gnawed at me. We'd come back from the war front shell-shocked, me with a limp from Chancellorsville and Elias missing half his hearing from the cannons, only to find the Pemberton land cursed deeper than any Yankee bullet. The Bible spoke of it starting generations back. Women driven mad by famine or fever drowning their children in this very well to spare them suffering, their wails echoing up from the depths ever since. Now Clara paced the porch, humming a lullaby that twisted into sobs, her eyes hollow as the bucket I'd just hauled. "Hand me the lantern," I said, taking it from Elias and lowering it into the mouth of the well. The flame danced, casting shadows that writhed like pale hands reaching for the light. We'd planned to pour salt and recite the old prayers tonight, a desperate bid to break the cycle before Clara followed her ancestors. But as the light hit the water, something rippled below, not reflection but movement. A face, blurred and eyeless, pressed against the surface from underneath. Elias swore, stepping back, his boot crunching on the dry earth. "That's no trick of the mind, Jed. We gotta get her away from here." Clara's humming stopped abruptly. She stared at us from the porch, the baby fussing in her arms. The air thickened, carrying a faint, milky scent, like spilled mother's milk mixed with rot. I straightened, heart pounding against my ribs. Our plan was simple. Cleanse the well at midnight, bind the spirits with iron and faith. But that face in the water promised it wouldn't go quiet. "Stay with her," I told Elias, grabbing the iron poker from the woodpile. "If it calls to her, don't let go." He nodded, hurrying toward the porch, but Clara was already moving, drawn like a moth to the well's edge, murmuring, "Hush now, little one. The water's waiting." I gripped the lantern tighter as the floorboards groaned under my boots, the air thick with the scent of damp earth and something sharper. Rot, maybe, or regret. The well house squatted at the edge of the Pemberton property like a forgotten confession, its door hanging crooked on rusted hinges. I'd come this far chasing whispers from the old folks in town, tales of Eliza Pemberton and her kin, women driven mad by hunger or war or worse, slipping their infants into the dark water below. But standing here in the Carolina dusk of '63, with cannon smoke still lingering on the wind from distant battles, I wondered if the curse was real or just the fever dreams of a land tearing itself apart. "My name's Elias Crow, and I'm no ghost hunter, just a surveyor from the north sent down to map these rebel hills before the lines shift again. But curiosity's a cruel master, and after hearing the stories in that dingy tavern, I couldn't shake the pull." The first voice had been a crone's, raspy as dried leaves. Pembertons drowned their blood in the well to appease the land boy. Been that way since the fever took the babies. I'd laughed it off then, nursing my whiskey, but the others chimed in. Farmers with calloused hands, eyes hollow from foraging what little the war left behind. They spoke of screams echoing up from the depths on moonless nights, of wells that never ran dry but poisoned the soul. Pushing the door open, I stepped inside, the lantern's flame flickering against walls slick with moss. The well's mouth yawned black in the center, a circle of rough stones framing oblivion. I knelt at the edge, peering down, but the light swallowed itself before hitting bottom. A chill crawled up my spine, not from the draft, but from the sudden certainty that I wasn't alone. Footsteps? No, softer, a rustle, like skirts brushing the floor behind me. I spun, heart slamming against my ribs, but the shadows played tricks. Nothing. Just the wind, I told myself, or the house settling. Yet my hand trembled as I unhooked the rope from its peg, the coarse fibers biting into my palm. Folks said the curse started with Eliza herself, back in the 1700s, sacrificing her child to some pagan rite when the crops failed. Her daughters followed, then granddaughters, each generation bound by blood and whisper. In '63, with the Yankees pushing south and starvation gnawing at doorsteps, the old fears resurfaced. Was that why Sarah Pemberton, the last of the line, had vanished last month? Her husband claimed fever, but the town murmured of the well. Lowering the bucket, I listened to the rope uncoil, each creak amplifying in the silence. The water slapped far below, a hollow echo that sounded almost like a sigh. I leaned closer, whispering my own fool question into the void. Who's down there? Ridiculous, but the words hung unanswered. Then a ripple, a faint splash, as if something stirred. Not a fish, not in a well this forsaken. My mind raced to the tales. Drowned babes rising as spirits, pulling the living down to join them. I jerked the rope back, the bucket sloshing empty, and backed toward the door. But as I turned, there she was, framed in the twilight. A woman with Sarah Pemberton's dark hair and haunted eyes, holding a swaddled bundle against her chest. "You shouldn't have come," she said, voice steady but edged with something feral. Not a ghost, but real enough, her shawl torn and muddied. The baby whimpered, tiny fists waving, and in that moment the curse felt less like legend and more like a chain tightening around us all. She stepped forward, not aggressively, but with the weariness of someone who'd run out of choices. The well calls them, Elias. It called my mother, and now. Her gaze dropped to the bundle, and I saw the fear plain, raw, unfiltered. I knew her name from the records, Lydia, Sarah's sister, rumored to have fled to the woods when the madness took hold. But here she was, flesh and blood, on the brink. I set the lantern down, hands raised to show I meant no harm. "Lydia, I'm not here to judge. The town's saying things about Sarah, the drownings." My voice cracked, betraying the lie. I was here for the map, for the story that might line my pockets back home. But seeing her, the weight of it pressed in. She clutched the child tighter. "It's not madness. It's the land. It takes what it needs when the men march off and leave us to starve." Her eyes flicked to the well, then back to me. "You Yankees think you can draw lines on paper and own it all. But the Pembertons know, the well remembers." Before I could respond, a distant rumble shook the ground. Thunder or artillery from the front lines creeping closer. The lantern sputtered, casting wild shadows that danced like accusations. Lydia's face paled, and she whispered to the baby, a lullaby twisted with sorrow. I had to decide. Run back to town with my half-drawn maps and half-baked tales, or stay and unravel this knot of history and horror. The well gurgled softly, as if urging me on, and I realized the real curse might be the one that bound strangers like us in the dark. The lantern's flame flickered as I pried open the warped door to the old Pemberton well house, the hinges screaming like a soul in torment. Dust motes danced in the thin light, and the air hit me thick with mildew and something sharper. Earth turned over too many times. Elias gripped my shoulder from behind, his breath ragged after the sprint from the main house. "You sure about this, Tom? Pa always said that well swallowed more than water." I nodded, though my gut twisted. We'd come this far chasing whispers in the night, screams echoing from the hollows, babies' cries that weren't from any living child. The curse, they called it, tied to the Pemberton women who'd walked the dirt paths of this Carolina farm a century back, driven mad by fever or famine, dropping their little ones into the dark to spare them suffering, or so the old folks spun it. But last night, when Widow Hargrove's infant went silent in her crib, only to wail again from the well's throat, I knew it wasn't just tales. Elias, my brother, cautious as ever with his farmer's hands calloused from plow and prayer, had argued against it till dawn. Now here we were, the two of us against whatever stirred below. The rope ladder dangled into blackness, frayed at the edges like it had been gnawed by rats or worse. I tied the lantern to my belt, the light casting jagged shadows on the stone wall slick with moss. "I'll go first. If I shout, pull me up fast." Elias muttered a curse under his breath, his wit gone sharp with fear. "Shout? You'll holler like a banshee if that thing grabs you. Just don't play hero, Tom. We got the farm to think of, and Ma's grave ain't far from here." I swung my legs over the rim, boots scraping lichen as I descended. Each rung groaned under my weight, the air growing colder, heavier, like breathing through wet cloth. 10 feet down, the walls narrowed, and a faint trickle echoed. Water or blood? My mind flashed to the stories. Eliza Pemberton in 1763, her eyes hollow after the smallpox took her husband, whispering apologies as she lowered her twins. They'd clawed at the stones on the way down, or so the legend went, nails leaving marks that time couldn't erase. I touched one now, a shallow groove under my fingers, and shivered. 20 feet in, the lantern sputtered, the flame pulling low as if the dark hungered for it. The well bottomed out in a shallow pool, mud sucking at my boots, bones littered the edges. Animal mostly, ribs and skulls picked clean. But in the center, half submerged, something gleamed. A locket, silver and tarnished, caught in the roots of an ancient oak that had forced its way through the earth overhead. I waded closer, heart pounding like cannon fire from the war we'd left behind in Charleston. The locket's chain was snapped, initials etched faint, EP. A splash behind me, small, deliberate. I whipped around, lantern swinging wild. Nothing but ripples lapping the stones. Elias! My voice bounced hollow, distorted. No answer from above, just the wind whistling through the shaft. Then it came, a gurgle, low and wet, rising from the pool's depths. Not water, a child's laugh bubbling up, turning to a sob that clawed at my ears. I snatched the locket, stuffing it into my shirt, and lunged for the ladder. The rope whipped in my hands, slick as if oiled. Foot over foot I climbed, mud weighing my legs, the sobs growing louder, closer, like tiny hands slapping the walls. Elias's face appeared at the top, pale as milk. "Tom, hurry, the rope's fraying!" Halfway up, the ladder bucked. Something yanked from below, a force like a millstone dragging me down. I kicked free, fingers bleeding on the rungs, and hauled myself over the rim just as the entire length snapped, coiling into the abyss like a serpent retreating. Elias pulled me clear, both of us collapsing against the doorframe, gasping. In my fist, the locket burned cold against my skin. What in God's name was that? Elias wheezed, his eyes on the dark mouth of the well, now silent but for the drip of water. I didn't answer. The curse wasn't done with us. The screams would come again tonight, and this time they'd know our names. The lantern's flame sputtered as I edged closer to the well's crumbling lip. The iron bucket chain rattling like bones in the wind. Elias gripped my arm, his calloused fingers digging in too hard, whispering, "Don't, Sarah, it's pulling you." But I couldn't stop. The voices from below weren't just echoes anymore. They were calling my name, soft as a lullaby, promising secrets about Mama's last night. We'd come to the Pemberton farm at dusk, after the preacher's warning in town fell on deaf ears. Elias, ever the skeptic with his farmer's logic and quick temper, had dragged me here to prove it all nonsense, to scatter the rumors like dust from the cotton fields. But now, crouched in the moonless yard, the air thick with the scent of damp stone and something sweeter, like milk gone sour, I felt the pull in my bones. The curse wasn't a tale. It was a hunger, born from those old sins in 1863 when the war turned mothers desperate. I peered down, the blackness swallowing the light, and there it was again, a ripple. Not water, but a face pale and pleading, eyes wide as a drowned fawn's. My hand trembled on the rope, heart pounding like cannon fire from the battles Pa used to recount. "Elias, listen," I breathed, but he yanked me back, his face ashen under the brim of his hat. "No listening to ghosts, girl. We came for answers, not to join 'em." He fumbled for the satchel at his belt, pulling out the silver locket Mama had worn, the one with the faded tintype of little Timmy, lost to fever before the well claimed her. Elias wasn't blood, just the hired hand who'd stayed after Pa marched off to fight the Yankees, but he'd become the brother I never had, cautious where I was reckless, his wit sharp as a scythe when fear crept in. The voice rose clearer now. "Sarah, come see what I hid." It was Mama's timbre laced with that Carolina drawl, the one that used to hum hymns over supper. I shook free of Elias, grabbing the rope before he could stop me. The chain groaned as I lowered the lantern, its glow fracturing into shards on the slick walls. Deeper it went, past the moss-slick stones until the light caught something. A glint not silver but bone-white, tangled in weeds at the bottom. Elias cursed under his breath, his boots scraping gravel as he lunged forward. "Damn it, that's far enough." He hauled on my shoulder, but I twisted away, the rope burning my palms. The air grew colder, pressing like a shroud, and I swear I felt tiny hands brushing my ankles, cold and insistent. Was this what drove her? The war's shadow, rations thin as whispers, babies crying through the night while soldiers burned the fields. The lantern hit bottom with a splash that wasn't water at all, more like a sigh releasing a faint milky vapor that curled up like smoke from a peace pipe. In it shapes flickered, women in homespun, faces gaunt, arms cradling bundles they lowered one by one. The Pemberton curse, they called it, starting with old widow Pemberton herself, who in '63 drowned her twins to spare them the Reaper's March. But it spread, a madness in the bloodline claiming kin down the generations until it reached Mama. I retched, the vapor stinging my eyes, and Elias pulled me clear, both of us tumbling back into the dirt. "We gotta burn it," he gasped, wiping his mouth. "The well, the farm, end this rot before it takes you too." His eyes, usually steady, darted to the shadows where the house loomed, its windows black as the pit. But as we staggered to our feet, a child's wail pierced the night, not from the well but from inside the house, sharp and real. Elias froze, hand on his knife. "That ain't no ghost," he muttered, voice cracking for the first time. I nodded, pulse thundering, knowing we'd stirred more than memories. Whatever lingered here wanted us to stay, to add to the tally. The lantern's flame guttered in the damp wind, casting jagged shadows across the well's stone rim. I gripped the rope tighter, my palms slick with sweat despite the chill night air, and peered down into the blackness that swallowed the light whole. Elias had insisted we come here alone without the others, whispering that the curse revealed itself only to those who sought it in pairs, like the mothers and their lost ones. My heart hammered against my ribs, not from fear of the drop, but from the weight of what we'd unearthed in the attic that afternoon. Faded letters, brittle as autumn leaves, detailing the Pemberton women's confessions, each one scrawled in ink that seemed to bleed even now. "Ezekiel, you hear that?" Elias's voice cut through the quiet, low and edged with the caution he'd worn like a second skin since we arrived at the old plantation. He knelt beside me, his wiry frame tense, one hand steadying the bucket we'd lowered earlier. I nodded, though the sound, a faint rhythmic splashing like water disturbed far below, had already set my nerves alight. It wasn't the wind. No, this was deliberate, as if something down there was stirring awake. We'd come to the well under cover of darkness after the household slept, driven by the journal's final entry. The babes call from the depths, and only blood answers. I tugged the rope, hauling up the bucket with a grunt. Water sloshed over the sides, cold droplets hitting my boots like accusations. Inside, tangled in the weeds we'd baited it with, floated a small sodden doll, porcelain face cracked, eyes painted in faded blue. Not ours. Elias's breath hitched and he reached in, fishing it out with trembling fingers. "This ain't right," he muttered, turning it over. Etched into the back was a name, Eliza Pemberton, dated 1842. The same woman whose letters spoke of drowning her infant to spare at the family's madness. The curse that twisted mothers into monsters. We'd planned to drop a lantern down, see what the light revealed, but now doubt clawed at me. What if the stories were true? Not just tales to scare field hands, but a real hunger in the earth, fed by those old sins. Elias, ever the practical one, the blacksmith who'd forged our resolve with his steady hammer strikes, shook his head. "We came for answers, Zeke. Can't turn back now." His eyes, sharp and unyielding, met mine, reminding me why I'd trusted him since boyhood. His grit, the way he faced storms without flinching. I lit a fresh taper from the lantern, its wax dripping hot onto my knuckles, and tied it to the rope's end. As I lowered it, the splashing grew louder, echoing up like muffled cries. The light descended, illuminating slick walls veined with moss until it hit bottom, 20 feet down where the water lapped at a cluster of bones, tiny and human, half buried in silt. My stomach twisted, not one set but several arranged in a crude circle, as if laid out for some unholy rite. Elias cursed under his breath, a rare slip from the man who quoted psalms in hard times. "Those letters, they weren't lying. The curse binds 'em here." He stood abruptly, pacing the well's edge, his boots crunching on gravel. I wanted to pull the lantern up, to run back to the safety of the big house where Widow Hargrove and young Clara waited, oblivious to our midnight folly. But Elias was right. We'd started this to break the hold on the land, to free the plantation from the whispers that drove workers away and soured the crops. One more step, I told myself, coiling the rope as the taper sputtered out below. Then the water boiled. Bubbles erupted, foaming white, and a hand, pale, bloated fingers like pruned roots, breached the surface, grasping for the rope. I jerked back, the line burning through my gloves, and Elias lunged to help, his shout lost in the sudden wail that rose from the depths, a chorus of infant screams, piercing and endless. We hauled together, muscles straining, until the bucket broke free, spilling its contents in a frigid spray. The hand vanished, but the cries lingered, burrowing into my skull. Panting, we stumbled away from the rim, the doll forgotten in the mud. Elias wiped his face, leaving a streak of grime. "That was no ghost story. It's real, Zeke. And it's angry. I nodded, the night's chill seeping deeper than the well's water. We'd come seeking truth, but now the curse knew our names, and dawn felt a lifetime away. The lantern's flame guttered as I descended the creaking stairs into the Pemberton cellar, the air thick with the scent of damp earth and something sharper, like rust-tainted water. Elias gripped my shoulder from behind, his breath ragged after our frantic dash from the attic where we'd found the first locket, tiny, engraved with a date from 1842, and stained with what looked like old blood. "We can't stop now, Sarah," he whispered, his voice steady despite the tremor in his hand. "If the curse is tied to these things, we need them all before the well claims another." I nodded, my fingers brushing the rough stone wall as we reached the bottom. The cellar was a labyrinth of shadows, barrels stacked like forgotten soldiers from the war that raged beyond our farm's borders. But it wasn't the Yankees or the whispers of secession that chilled me now. It was the low hum emanating from the far corner, where the well's mouth gaped like a silent scream. Mama had sealed it years ago after the fever took little Timmy, but the boards across it were splintered as if pried loose by invisible hands. Elias lit a second lantern, casting jagged light on the water below, still, black, unbroken. "Look there," he said, pointing to a glint on the lip of the well. I leaned closer, heart pounding, and saw it. Another locket, half buried in the mossy stones, its chain dangling like a noose. As I reached for it, the water rippled, not from a stone or wind, but from within, as if something stirred in the depths. "Don't touch it," Elias hissed, pulling me back just as a woman's voice echoed up from the well, faint and pleading. "My baby. Give him back." It was Mama's voice, or close enough to twist the knife in my gut. I froze, the locket inches from my fingers while Elias's face paled in the lantern glow. We'd come this far chasing the curse's fragments, piecing together the drownings that haunted our bloodline. But now it felt like the well was waking, hungry for the next Pemberton soul. I snatched the locket anyway, the metal cold as grave soil, and snapped it open. Inside, a faded curl of infant hair and etched on the inner lid. "Forgive me." 1857, the voice rose again, sharper this time, and the water churned, sending a spray that tasted of salt and sorrow onto my face. Elias yanked me away as the boards groaned and cracked, the well's edge crumbling like dry bone. We bolted up the stairs, the locket burning in my palm, but behind us the hum grew into a wail that followed us into the night, promising that 3 down meant the curse was only beginning to tighten its grip. The lantern's flame guttered as I descended the creaking stairs into the Pemberton cellar, the air thick with the scent of damp stone and something sharper, like iron left too long in the rain. My boots scraped against the uneven floor, each step echoing my pounding heart. Why had I come down here alone after Eliza's warning? The well was just ahead, its mouth a black circle in the corner, rimmed with mossy bricks that seemed to pulse in the flickering light. I gripped the rope I'd tied around my waist, the one linking me back to the kitchen above. But it felt flimsy now, a child's toy against whatever pulled at me. Eliza's voice still rang in my ears from upstairs, sharp and unyielding. "Thomas, you fool, that well swallowed more than water. It's the curse calling you like it did your ma." But I couldn't stop. Not after finding the locket in the attic, the one with Mother's faded miniature inside, her eyes staring out as if she'd known what was coming. The locket had been tucked in a bundle of yellowed letters, ones I'd never seen, speaking of drownings that weren't accidents, babies gone quiet in the night, mothers weeping by the well at dawn. Pemberton land had always whispered of such things, but since the war chewed through Carolina, leaving fields barren and men like Pa broken, the stories clawed their way into the light. I edged closer, the rope taut behind me, and peered into the depths. The water below was still, unnaturally so, reflecting the lantern like a mirror to nowhere. A faint ripple stirred it then, not from wind or drip, but something rising. Bubbles, slow and deliberate, carrying up a murmur that wasn't water's voice. It was singing, soft and mournful, a lullaby I'd heard Mother hum before the well took her too. My breath caught. Was this madness or the curse uncoiling? I knelt, fingers brushing the cold rim, and the singing sharpened into words. "Come down, child. Join the quiet." The rope jerked in my hand, yanked from above. Eliza, pulling me back? No, it was slackening, unraveling thread by thread as if the well itself hungered for it. I scrambled upright, heart slamming against my ribs, but the lantern slipped from my grasp, tumbling end over end into the black. It hit the water with a splash that echoed like a scream, and light bloomed below, Not dying, but spreading, illuminating faces in the depths. Pale, eyeless faces, mouths open in eternal song, mothers and their little ones reaching up with arms too long, too insistent. I bolted for the stairs, the singing swelling behind me, wrapping around my ankles like wet hands. Thomas! Eliza's cry cut through from above, her face appearing at the top, wild-eyed and fierce. She hauled on the remaining rope, her wiry arms straining. Sister's grit, the kind that had kept us fed through blockades and fever. I lunged for the first step, but the Wells pull yanked me back, a cold grip on my boot. Fabric tore. I kicked free, clawing upward as the murmur turned to wails, the air growing heavy, pressing like a shroud. We tumbled out into the kitchen together, slamming the trapdoor shut, Eliza barring it with the oak beam while I gasped against the wall. The singing muffled but didn't stop, vibrating through the floorboards. "It's real," I wheezed, clutching the frayed end of the rope. "They want more. Us now." Eliza wiped sweat from her brow, her cautious eyes narrowing, but there was no fear in them, only resolve. "Then we end it, brother, before Pa comes home from the front and finds ghosts waiting." Outside, the Carolina dusk bled red through the windows, the war's shadow lengthening. We'd burn the letters, seal the well, anything to silence it. But as the first stars pricked the sky, I felt the locket heavy in my pocket, Mother's eyes watching, wondering if we'd truly escaped or just delayed the pull. The lantern's flame guttered in the damp wind, casting jagged shadows across the well's stone rim as I peered down into the black maw. My fingers, slick with sweat and the night's chill, gripped the rope tighter than necessary. Elias had sworn this was the way. Descend alone, face whatever lingered in the depths where the Pemberton women had met their ends. But as the coarse fibers bit into my palms, doubt clawed at me like the roots twisting through the earth here. What if his stories were just fevered lies spun to keep me from bolting back to the plantation house? I swung my legs over the edge, boots scraping against the moss-slick stones. The air below carried a sour tang, like milk gone bad mixed with something metallic. Blood, maybe, or the iron of old tears. "Elias," I called up, my voice echoing hollowly. No answer came. Just the rustle of leaves from the oak that loomed above, its branches like skeletal fingers pointing to forgotten sins. He'd stayed topside, rifle in hand, watching for ghosts or worse. Raiders, he said, though we both knew the real fear was the curse itself. Mothers who'd drowned their babes here, one after another in fits of madness or mercy during the fever years. And now, with the war chewing up the land, it felt like the well was hungry again. The rope creaked as I lowered myself inch by inch, the walls closing in with their wet embrace. My heart hammered, each beat a reminder of Eliza's face back home. Pale, whispering about the dreams that plagued her since the child quickened in her belly. She'd begged me not to come, but the midwife's words rang louder. "The Pemberton's mark is on you, Harlan. Break it or it'll claim her too." I wasn't a superstitious man, not like Elias with his hoodoo charms, but the miscarriages, the whispers from the hollows. They added up like debts in a ledger. Halfway down, the light from above faded to a pinprick, and the darkness pressed like a living thing. My boot slipped on a loose stone and I jolted, rope burning through my gloves. A splash echoed from below, water or something stirring. I froze, breath shallow, listening. Nothing. Just the drip-drip of condensation, steady as a pulse. Elias's voice finally filtered down, muffled and urgent. "Harlan, you see anything?" "The wind's picking up, feels like rain." "Nothing but black," I muttered, more to myself than him. But as my eyes adjusted, shapes emerged. Faint scratches on the walls like claw marks too high for water to have made. Names, maybe. Pemberton etched in desperation. I thought of my own ma gone before the war, her tales of the well as a gateway to judgment. "Keep talking," I yelled back. "Don't leave me hanging here like bait." The descent dragged on, muscles aching, until my boots touched shallow water, cold, ankle-deep, lapping at the stones like a tongue. I unhooked the lantern from my belt, holding it high. The light danced across the surface, revealing not just water but debris, bones small and fragile, picked clean. Rabbit or... no, I wouldn't think it. In the center, a wooden cradle floated, half submerged, its carvings worn but unmistakable. Roses and thorns, the Pemberton sigil. A sob caught in my throat, unbidden. This was madness. I waded forward, the water soaking my trousers, chilling me to the bone. The cradle bobbed gently as if waiting. My hand trembled as I reached for it, fingers brushing sodden cloth. Inside, nothing but rags, heavy with silt. But as I lifted it, a whisper rose from the depths, not wind, not echo, but a voice faint and pleading. Harlan, save us. I dropped the cradle, splashing back, heart seizing. Elias's shout came from above, sharper now. What was that?
Harlan, talk to me!
It's here, I gasped, scanning the water. Ripples spread from where the cradle had sunk, forming a shape. A woman's face, eyes hollow, mouth open in silent scream. Not real, couldn't be, but the cold gripped me harder, pulling at my legs like hands. I thrashed toward the rope, the whispers multiplying, a chorus of grief and rage. The curse wasn't stone and story. It was alive, feeding on the guilt we'd all buried. Grabbing the rope, I hauled upward, muscles screaming, the lantern swinging wildly. The faces multiplied in the water below, reaching, their drowned pleas echoing in my skull. Elias's hands appeared at the rim, pulling with me. His face twisted in the dim light. Climb, damn you. It's calling the storm. Thunder cracked overhead as I crested the edge, collapsing onto the grass, soaked and shaking. The well mouth gaped behind me, innocent now, but I knew better. Elias knelt, pressing a flask to my lips. Whiskey burning away the chill. You saw them, he said, not a question. I nodded, spitting out the taste of the depths. The mothers. And the babes. It's not done with us. Rain began to fall, heavy sheets blurring the night. But the real flood was inside me now. The weight of what I'd stirred, and the fear that Eliza's dreams were just the beginning. We'd broken the surface, but the curse ran deeper, and tomorrow we'd have to go back. The lantern's flame sputtered in my hand, casting jagged shadows across the well's stone rim. I leaned over, heart pounding like a war drum, and peered into the black maw below. Eliza's voice echoed from behind me, sharp and urgent. Elias, don't you dare. We've come this far without tempting the devil himself. I ignored her, the rope's coarse fibers biting into my palms as I uncoiled it. The air down there smelled of damp earth and something fouler, like milk gone rancid mixed with iron. Mama Pemberton's journal had led us here to the old homestead's forgotten yard, whispering of the curse's heart, the well where 3 generations of women had ended their babes' cries. Not madness, the pages claimed, but a compulsion. A voice from the depths promising peace if the innocent fed the dark. Hand me the hook, I muttered, my voice steadier than I felt. Thomas, ever the cautious one, hesitated at my side, his wiry frame tense under his threadbare coat. This is folly, Elias. The war's taken enough without us chasing ghosts. What if it's not the well? What if it's just fever dreams from the blockade? His words hung there, but I shook my head, securing the iron hook to the rope's end. We'd ridden hard from Charleston, dodging Yankee patrols and Confederate conscriptors, all because Eliza's locket, passed down from her great-aunt, held a locket-sized portrait of a woman with hollow eyes, and inscribed on the back, "The water takes what the blood cannot bear." Eliza, my cousin by marriage and sharp-tongued as a switch, believed it ran in our line. Her own miscarriage last winter had her convinced the curse would claim her next child if we didn't break it. The hook plunged into the darkness, splashing faintly. I counted the pulls, each one hauling up silt and memories I didn't want. Thomas gripped my shoulder, his calloused fingers a warning. If you feel it, Elias, the pull, drop everything and climb out. I've heard the stories from the field hands. It starts as a whisper, then it's your own voice telling you to jump. Eliza stepped closer, her skirts brushing the weeds, face pale in the lantern light. He's right. But if we find the relics, the bones or whatever's down there, we burn them at dawn. No half measures. Her wit had dulled since the journey began, replaced by a fierce determination that both scared and steadied me. We'd argued the whole way. Me pushing for confrontation, her for caution, Thomas mediating with his farmer's practicality. Now with the moon slicing through the pines like a bayonet, there was no more debate. The rope grew heavier, snagging on something unyielding. I heaved, muscles burning, and up came a sodden bundle, rags wrapped around what felt like brittle sticks. Eliza gasped, crossing herself as I laid it on the grass. Unraveling the cloth revealed tiny skulls no bigger than my fist, etched with faint carvings. Waves, eyes, pleas in a tongue long dead. The curse's toll tangible now, not just ink on yellowed pages. But as I touched one, a chill rippled up my arm and the whispers started. Not from the wind, but inside, soft, insistent. Feed me more. End the line. My vision blurred, the well yawning wider, inviting. Elias! Thomas yanked me back, his face inches from mine. Fight it. We're not leaving without you. Eliza snatched the lantern, thrusting it toward the bones. Fire. Now. Her hands shook as she struck flint, but the flames caught, devouring the relics in a hungry crackle. The whispers faded, leaving only the acrid smoke and the well's silent stare. We stood there, breaths ragged, the night pressing in. The curse wasn't broken, not yet, but we'd struck at its root. Dawn would bring Yankees or worse, and Eliza's hand on her belly told me the stakes had just risen. One step closer, but the well's shadow lingered in my dreams long after. The lantern's flame guttered as I edged closer to the well's crumbling lip, the air thick with the rot of forgotten earth. Eliza's hand clamped my arm, her nails digging in like thorns, cautious as ever, but her whisper cut sharp. "Elias, you hear that?" It's not the wind. I did hear it, a low keening that rose from the black mouth below like a child's wail twisted through water. We'd come this far chasing whispers of the Pemberton curse. 3 nights riding hard from the skirmishes up north, and now with Josiah slumped against the oak behind us, fever-racked from that skirmisher's bullet graze, it felt like the devil himself was calling our bluff. I peered down, the rope ladder swaying in my grip, slick with dew or something worse. The well was deeper than it looked, a throat of stone swallowing the stars, and memory clawed at me. Those tales from the old folks in town, how the Pemberton women, driven mad by the war's hunger, had slipped their babes into the water one by one, convinced the Yankees were coming to burn it all. To spare them the fire, they'd said, but the guilt had drowned them too, or so the curse went. Any who disturbed the rest would hear the cries until their own blood answered. Foolish superstition, I'd called it back in camp, but Josiah's labored breaths reminded me we'd already paid a price. His wound wasn't healing right, and the dreams he'd muttered about, tiny hands pulling him under, weren't just delirium. "Eliza, hold the light steady," I said, my voice steadier than my pounding heart. She nodded, her face pale under the kerchief, brave in her way, but no fool to charge blind. We'd planned this simple. Lower me down, retrieve whatever token marked the last drowning, a locket maybe from the stories, to break the hold. But as I swung my legs over the edge, the keening sharpened, words forming in the wet echo. "Mama, cold." My boot slipped on the rung, and for a heartbeat, I dangled, the rope burning my palms. Grit your teeth, Elias, I thought. Ingenuity's what got us through Shiloh, not panic. We jury-rigged this ladder from barn scraps, tested it twice, but down here, in the curse's cradle, plans frayed like old sailcloth. The descent took an age, each creak of the rope a taunt, the walls closing in with moss-slick stones that wept dark rivulets. At the bottom, ankle-deep in brackish pool, the water lapped cold against my boots, carrying the faint glint of bones. Small, too small. I swallowed bile, fumbling for the lantern I'd clipped to my belt. The light caught a glint, a silver chain half buried in silt, the locket heart-shaped, engraved with a P. This was it, the anchor. But as I reached, the water boiled, bubbles rising with that wail, louder now, pulling at my ears like hooks. Hands, pale, translucent, broke the surface, grasping, and I jerked back, splashing, my mind racing for a fix. Not fight, not run, adapt. I yanked my knife not to slash ghosts, but to carve a notch in the stone wall, a makeshift pulley anchor if the rope gave. Up above, Eliza's voice cracked through the dark. "Elias, something's moving, the shadows by the tree line. Gunfire? Raiders? No time." I hooked the locket to my belt, the cries turning to laughter, mocking as the water level crept higher, unnaturally fast. Josiah coughed a wet rattle, too weak to help, but his grit had gotten us here. His idea to track the well by the old maps, dodging patrols. I climbed faster than sense allowed, the ladder whipping as hands tugged below. Halfway up, a rung snapped, and I swung out, slamming against the wall, the locket digging into my hip like judgment. Eliza hauled with all her wiry strength, her breaths coming in sobs, but we made the lip together, collapsing in the mud as the keening faded to a hiss. Josiah stirred, eyes glassy but open. "Got it?" he rasped. I nodded, unclasping the locket. Inside, a faded curl of hair, dark as Eliza's. The curse wasn't broken, not yet. The well's mouth still gaped, hungry, but we'd taken a piece, and in the distance hoofbeats thrummed. Confederate riders or Union scouts. Our escape narrowed, the night's chill settling like a debt unpaid. We'd adapt again, 3 souls bound tighter by the dark we'd stirred. The lantern's flame guttered in the damp wind seeping through the well's stone rim, casting jagged shadows that clawed at Elias's face as he peered down. His calloused hands gripped the rope, slick with sweat and something thicker. Blood from the gash on his palm where the thorns had torn during the frantic climb. Below, the water lapped in lazy circles, hiding whatever secrets the Pemberton well still clutched after all these years. "You hear that?" he whispered to Sarah, his voice rough as gravel, the weight of the empty bucket swinging like a noose between them. Sarah knelt beside him, her skirts muddied from the trek through the overgrown fields, the locket at her throat glinting faintly, a twin to the one lost in the depths. She was the cautious one, always had been since they were children whispering ghost stories in the shadow of the old plantation house, but tonight her eyes burned with a resolve that scared him more than the curse. "It's not the wind, Elias, it's her," calling again. She pressed a hand to the stone, feeling the chill seep into her bones, the same chill that had driven their mother to the edge all those decades ago. The family lore said the Pemberton women drowned their babes to spare them the madness, but Elias had never believed it until the dreams started, until he saw the faces in the water last full moon. He tugged the rope, hauling up the bucket with a creak that echoed like a sob. Empty, as always, but this time something floated to the surface. A scrap of lace, yellowed and frayed, identical to the christening gown their aunt had worn before she vanished into the night. "Damn it all," Elias muttered, snatching it out and holding it to the light. The fabric whispered against his fingers, carrying the faint scent of milk and regret. Sarah's breath hitched. She'd come here to end it, to confront the well's hunger that had claimed 3 generations, but now doubt flickered in her gaze. The rival preacher from town had warned them. The curse wasn't just a tale. It was a debt unpaid, stirred by the war's chaos. Soldiers trampling sacred ground and unearthing bones. From the tree line, a rustle broke the night's hush. Elias spun, dropping the lace into the dirt, his heart pounding like cannon fire from the distant battles. It was Thomas, their cousin, stumbling out of the brush with his rifle slung over one shoulder, face gaunt under the moonlight. He'd been the witty one once, quick with a jest to lighten the load of sharecropping life, but the war had carved hollows in his cheeks and suspicion in his eyes. "Y'all fools," he panted, collapsing against a gnarled oak. "I followed you from the crossroads. Heard the whispers, too, same as after Gettysburg. It's spreading, Elias. Folks in the hollow say their wives are walking in their sleep, heading this way." Sarah stood, brushing soil from her knees, her voice steady, despite the tremor in her hands. "Then we face it together. No more running." She glanced at the well where the water had stilled unnaturally, reflecting stars that weren't there. Elias nodded, though his gut twisted. Their plan had been simple. Pour salt and recite the old prayers at dawn. But Thomas's arrival meant complications, meant the curse might sense their numbers and strike harder. He uncoiled more rope, fashioning a harness, while Sarah lit a second lantern, its glow pushing back the dark, just enough to reveal faint scratches on the well's rim. Tiny hands, clawing upward. As they lowered Elias first, the rope bit into his ribs, the descent a slow swallow into blackness. The air grew thick, laced with the metallic tang of deep earth and something sweeter like forgotten lullabies. Halfway down, a whisper slithered up, his mother's voice, or was it Sarah's future echo? Begging him to let go, to join the quiet below. He clenched his jaw, focusing on the faint circle of light above where Sarah and Thomas argued in hushed tones, their silhouettes arguing over whether to pull him back. The bucket had lied. This well didn't give up its dead easily. His boots touched water cold as a grave, and ripples spread, forming shapes, infant faces, eyes wide and accusing. Up top, Sarah tied off the rope, her fingers numb. Thomas paced, rifle at the ready, scanning the fog rolling in from the river. If it's the curse pulling them under, what's it want from us now? The war's taken enough, my brother's gone. Elias's farm's burned. His words hung heavy, a reminder of the real stakes, not just family ghosts, but the fragile thread of their lives unraveling amid cannon smoke and conscription notices. Sarah didn't answer. She leaned over the edge, calling down, "Elias? You see anything?" The rope jerked once, twice, then went slack, and panic clawed her throat. Elias surfaced, gasping, clutching a small sodden bundle wrapped in burlap. A locket, perhaps, or worse. But as he climbed, the well groaned, stones shifting like teeth in a maw, and the whispers turned to wails, drawing shadows from the woods. Thomas raised his rifle, firing a warning shot into the night, the crack splitting the air. Sarah hauled with all her might, her arms burning, knowing this descent had changed them. The curse wasn't sated. It was awakening, hungry for the last Pembertons to seal its hold. And in the distance, more footsteps echoed. Others, drawn by the call, mothers and lost kin, converging on the well under the Carolina sky. The well's mouth gaped like a wound in the earth, its stones slick with dew and something darker, and I gripped the rope tighter, my palms burning as I lowered myself inch by inch. Elias had tied the knots himself, double then triple, swearing by the knots his pa taught him during the war, but doubt clawed at me anyway. Below, the water lapped in whispers, carrying echoes of those old cries we'd all heard since childhood, the ones that twisted your gut like a bayonet. "You hear that?" I called up, voice cracking against the damp air. "Keep going, Sarah," Elias shouted back from the rim, his face a pale smudge against the moonlight. He was the cautious one, always had been, but tonight his grit shone through, eyes fierce as he braced against the wind whipping through the Pemberton pines. Beside him, Widow Hargrove clutched her lantern, its flame flickering like her resolve, witty in the daylight with her sharp tongue, but here she was, all edges, no jests. "Ain't no turning back now. That curse took my boy. It'll not take yours." My boots scraped the crumbling wall, sending pebbles skittering into the black. The air grew thicker, colder, tasting of iron and regret, and I wondered if this was madness, chasing ghosts in a well that had swallowed secrets for generations. The Pembertons built this place in 32, or so the tales went after the fever claimed half the county. Mothers driven mad by grief or something worse, drowning their babes to spare them the suffering, or so the whisper said. But Elias and I, we'd lost our little Mary last harvest to the same wasting sickness, and when the cries started up again at night, pulling me from sleep like hooks, we knew it wasn't just fever. It was the curse, hungry, calling for more. Halfway down, the rope jerked in my hands. Not from above, Elias wouldn't falter, but from below, a tug like fingers closing around my ankle. I froze, heart slamming against my ribs, and peered into the murk. Shadows stirred in the water, shapes that weren't fish or silt. Faces half-formed, eyes pleading or accusing, I couldn't tell. "Elias, it's pullin'!" My voice echoed weirdly, bouncing off the stones like a laugh turned sour. "Hold fast!" he bellowed, and I heard the strain in his grunt as he leaned back, muscles corded under his shirt. Widow Hargrove's voice cut in, sharp as a whip. "Sing it down, girl." The old hymn, "Drown the whale with something pure." She was right. We'd pieced that together from the fragments in the family Bible, the only clue that hadn't burned in the fire that took the Pemberton house last year. I swallowed dry, started humming low, the tune Mama sang to Mary. "Rock of Ages, cleft for me." The words faltered as the tugging strengthened, the rope fraying against my gloves, but the shadows writhed as if the song burned them. Deeper now, the well narrowed, the water rising to meet me like a dark promise. My lantern, hooked to my belt, cast jittery light on bloated roots snaking from the walls, and there, etched into the stone, faint but unmistakable, a handprint small as a child's, smeared with what looked like dried blood. The curse's mark, or the start of it. We'd come here on a hunch after Elias found the locket in the attic, Mary's tiny one with the locket inside bearing the Pemberton crest. It tied us back, made us vessels for the old grief. If I could reach the bottom, touch the source, some relic, some bone, they said it might break the chain. The water hit my boots first, icy as grave soil, soaking through leather in seconds. I dangled there, rope singing in my grip, and the faces surfaced clearer, pale, bloated, mouths opening in silent screams. One looked like Mary, curls matted, eyes wide with that final terror. "No," I gasped, kicking out, but the cold seeped up my legs, numbing will as much as flesh. Above, Elias's shouts grew distant, the widow's hymn joining his, a fragile thread against the pull. Then it came, a surge from below, not water but will slamming me down like a hammer. The rope snapped taut, then slack, and I plunged, lantern shattering on impact, plunging me into blindness. The water closed over my head, thick with silt and sorrow, and hands, real or not, grabbed at my skirts, dragging me toward the bottom where the drowned mothers waited, their babies' cries bubbling up like accusations. I thrashed, lungs burning, the hymn dying on my lips as darkness swallowed me whole. But Elias's face flashed in my mind, his steady hands the way he'd held me after Mary's grave was filled. Grit, that's what he always said. Human grit against the devil's tricks. I twisted, fumbling for the knife at my belt, the one he'd sharpened that morning. It sliced through the water, through the grasping shadows, and I felt them recoil, a hiss like steam from a kettle. Pushing up, lungs screaming, I broke surface, gasping, the rope still in reach, frayed but holding. "Pull!" I yelled, and above they heaved as one, Elias's roar mixing with the widow's prayers. Inch by agonizing inch I rose, the well vomiting me back to the night air, dripping and shaking but alive. As my hands crested the rim, Elias hauled me over, collapsing beside me in the mud while the widow stamped out the lantern, her face etched with something like hope. But the cries didn't stop. I gripped the rusted lantern tighter, its flame flickering like a heartbeat against the damp stone walls of the well. The air down here was thick, choked with the rot of earth and something fouler. Memories, maybe, or the ghosts of what we'd stirred. Elias had gone first, his boots scraping the ladder rungs as he descended into the black maw we'd uncovered beneath the Pemberton barn. "Keep it steady, Nate," he'd whispered up to me, his voice echoing like a confession. Now with him vanished into the depths and the rope ladder swaying empty. I wondered if I'd made the worst mistake of my life by following him. The well wasn't just a hole in the ground. It was a throat swallowing light and sound alike. I could hear water lapping far below, but it wasn't the clean rush of a spring. No, this was stagnant, poisoned by the years since '63, when the whispers said Eliza Pemberton had walked her babes one by one to this edge and let them slip into the dark. Madness from the war, they claimed. Sherman's march leaving her widowed, starved, seeing devils in her own children's eyes. But Elias, with his fool's grin and scholar's books, swore it was the curse, an old Carolina hex woven from blood and betrayal, binding mothers to drown their innocence to appease some forgotten spirit. I hit the bottom with a splash that soaked my trousers to the knee. The water was icy, numbing my legs as I sloshed forward, lantern raised. "Elias?" My call bounced back, distorted like a laugh from the shadows. The walls curved inward here, etched with scratches that might have been tools or claws, deep gouges that told of frantic escapes never made. Up above, the sky was a distant gray circle, shrinking as I moved deeper into the tunnel that branched off from the well's base. Elias had mapped it from old ledgers, claiming it led to the Pemberton root cellar where the real secrets lay buried. A scrape ahead, boots on stone. I quickened my pace, the lantern swinging wild, casting shadows that danced like specters. "Elias, damn you, answer me." The tunnel narrowed, forcing me to duck, my shoulders brushing the walls slick with moss and something stickier. Then light, faint bobbing from around the bend. I rounded it, and there he was, kneeling by a wooden crate half submerged in the flood, prying at the lid with a crowbar. "Found it," he said, not looking up. His voice strained but triumphant. His face was smeared with mud, eyes wild in the lantern glow. Inside the crate, glinting dully, were trinkets, a silver locket, tarnished spoons, a child's shoe no bigger than my palm. Relics from the drowned ones, he figured, offerings to break the curse. But as he lifted the locket, a low rumble shook the tunnel, earth groaning like it was waking. Water surged suddenly, ankle-deep, turning to knee in a heartbeat cold as grave soil. "The tide," Elias cursed, scrambling up. We'd forgotten the creek nearby, swollen from last night's rain, seeping in through cracks we couldn't see. I grabbed his arm, hauling him back as the current tugged at us, pulling relics and dirt into a swirling churn. The lantern sputtered, nearly drowning, and in that dimming light I saw eyes, real ones, or so panic made me think. Watching from the water's edge, pale faces of the lost pressing against the stone. We fought back the way we'd come, the rope ladder slick and taut as the well filled. Elias climbed first, me shoving from below, my fingers numb and slipping. Halfway up, the wood cracked, a rung giving way under my weight. And I dangled there, lantern extinguished, plunged into absolute black. "Climb, Nate. Use the rope." His voice from above, urgent, pulling hand over hand. I did, muscles burning, the water rising like vengeful hands nipping at my heels. We burst into the barn gasping, collapsing on hay that smelled of dust and safety. But the well mouth bubbled still, spilling over. And in the locket Elias clutched, dripping, open now. A faded miniature portrait stared back. Eliza's face serene, with her babe's tiny hand on her cheek. No curse broken, just more weight to carry. The farm would flood by dawn, and with it whatever truths we'd sought. I met Elias's eyes, saw the doubt mirroring my own. We'd come for answers, but all we'd unearthed was the pull of the deep, reminding us some things were meant to stay drowned. The well's mouth gaped like a fresh wound under the Carolina moon, its stones slick with dew and something darker. Blood, or the echo of it from all those years ago. I gripped the rope ladder tighter, my calloused hands burning as I descended into the pit, the air turning thick and sour with the rot of forgotten water. Elias shouted from above, his voice cracking like dry timber. "Hurry, John!" The wind's shifting, it's coming. I didn't look up. I couldn't afford to. The curse had waited a century and a half, but tonight in 1863, it hungered for one more soul. Mine or my sister's child if I failed. My boots hit the muck at the bottom with a wet slap, and I yanked the lantern from my belt, its flame sputtering against the damp. Shadows writhed on the walls. Not just from the light, but something alive. Whispering names I'd heard in nightmares. Eliza Pemberton, first of them, who'd drowned her babe to spare it the fever's grip, only to birth the curse that bound every mother after. The water level had risen since dusk, lapping at my ankles now, cold as grave soil. I waded forward, the weight of the iron key, forged from the Pemberton anvil, etched with runes Elias had puzzled out from old diaries, pulling at my neck chain. A ripple broke the surface ahead, and there it was. The shape, half woman, half specter, her arms outstretched like branches in a storm. Her eyes, milky and endless, locked on me. "Give it back," she hissed, voice bubbling up like submerged screams. "The child is mine." My heart hammered, but I thought of Clara upstairs in the cabin cradling little Mary, both of them feverish and fading. This wasn't just a ghost. It was the land's revenge, the well of vein pumping out the sins of desperation. I unhooked the key, holding it high. "Not tonight. Not ever." She lunged, water surging in a frigid wave that knocked me to my knees. Claws, ethereal but sharp as scythes, raked my arm, drawing blood that mingled with the pool. Pain flared white-hot, but I twisted away, slamming the key into the rusted lock at the well's heart, hidden behind a slab of stone. It grated like bones grinding, and for a moment the world held its breath. Elias's voice echoed down, "John." The rope, it's fraying. Above, the wind howled, carrying the cries of phantom infants, the curses chorus rising to claim us all. I turned the key with a force born of every sleepless night watching Clara waste away. Every prayer spat at a god who'd let the war and the yellow fever twist good folk into monsters. The lock gave way with a sigh, and the water boiled, the specter shrieking as cracks spiderwebbed the well's walls. Light. Not moonlight, but something purer, like dawn breaking underground, poured from the fissures, illuminating bones at the bottom, tiny, tangled in the silt. The shape dissolved into mist, her wail fading into the splash of receding waves. I scrambled up the ladder as the well trembled, stones loosening overhead. Elias hauled me out just as the first chunk plummeted past, crashing into the emptying pit. We collapsed on the grass, gasping, my arm a ruin of gashes that would scar deep. Dawn crept over the pines, painting the cabin gold. Clara met us at the door, Mary in her arms, the fever broken as if by miracle. But as I bandaged my wounds by the fire, I felt the weight of it still. The curse shattered, but its echo lingered in the silence of the well, now dry and harmless. We'd won through grit and secrets unearthed, but Carolina's soil remembered, and some debts left marks that time couldn't erase.